Thank you, Andrea. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here tonight. Most people are unfamiliar with the word milliner. The term is derived from an ancient technique of weaving and plaiting straw, which originated in Milan in the 15th century. It was not the love of hats per se, which led me to my profession, but a love of art and design, a love of presentation and of detail, which I believe is a common thread woven in the history of the Italian culture. I first visited Italy as a child, and I can recall the impression that trip made on me. I have since returned several times, and I am always struck by the splendor, ingenuity, imagination, depth of intelligence, and incomprehensible talent possessed by our ancestors, who conceived and created, arguably, the finest art and structures in the world. My heritage has always been a factor in the way I approach design. Italians are notably fastidious about many things. For example, which noodle to use with particular sauce, about timing their pasta to cook perfectly. But as most of you know, in Italian heritage, perfection cannot be rushed. Detail is very important, and for me, I know when what I've created is right, when my eye is pleased. It is my equivalent of al dente. Although I trained in couture tailoring and fashion design, I excelled in the courses which required manipulating materials by hand. I loved working with my hands, and I found hat making to be the most like sculpture. It is an art form with nearly endless potential for creativity, limited only by physics. If balance is in harmony, anything is possible. While in college, I had the tremendous good fortune to meet the late, legendary designer Gianni Versace. I remember that he spoke with an interpreter, relating whatever he could to inspire us as young design students. I was struck by his dignity, his honesty, but more than anything, his humility. He was without arrogance and had no air of superiority, though he was considered the most gifted designer in the world. He presented his collection of metal mesh gowns and dresses, which easily weighed 12 to 15 pounds each, and set the fashion world on its ear. It reinforced for me again that anything was possible. After the lecture, he stayed to meet with each of us individually, personally, and it was his graciousness which so profoundly impacted me that I promised myself to commit to memory not only his genius, but his humility. He was the embodiment of the Italian artist, and he was my role model. In the following years, I worked at a prominent bridal salon, designing headpieces, then was hired as head designer for a women's hat boutique. It was there that I refined my millinery skills and learned about business ownership, as I was given much more responsibility than simply designing. I later opened a vintage boutique, much to the chagrin of my family. I included my own couture pieces among the inventory. I was making clothing again, but I still made hats, and in the 90s, hats were very trendy. Unfortunately, I was ahead of the curve in the vintage market. This was before all the celebrities were wearing vintage. So I closed my boutique and refocused on developing a wholesale millinery line. I sold to department stores including Marshall Field's, Henry Bendel, and Nordstrom. I sold to many local high-end boutiques and slowly built up my own private clientele. Today, I have my own atelier, which means workshop, showroom in French. There is no Italian word for it, but believe me, I would use it if there was one. My work is influenced by many things. I love architecture and ornamental detail. I admire the beauty and elegance of cars designed by Ettore Bugatti. And when I am listening to my favorite arias, I can visualize the colors of the Italian countryside, the memories of which work their way into whatever I am creating in representative form. I am naturally affected aesthetically by the great couturiers like Christian Dior, Madeleine Vionnet, and Coco Chanel, who began her career as a milliner. But it was her fashion rival, Elsa Schiaparelli, who was considered a true genius, whose work inspires me much more because she loved taking risks. She collaborated with artists like Salvador Dali, bringing to fashion the playfulness and sense of anything goes of the Dada and Surrealist movements. Her upside-down shoe hat is notably one of the most recognized and celebrated in fashion history. She loved to play with the juxtaposition of colors, shapes, and textures. She embraced new technologies and materials. However, there were more lasting innovations. Schiaparelli created red-brown dresses decades before Diane von Furstenberg, and crumpled up rayon 50 years before Izzy Miyake's pleats and crinkles. In 1930 alone, she created the first evening dress with a jacket and the first clothes with visible zippers. In fact, fastenings were something of a specialty for Elsa, from a jacket buttoned with silver tambourines to one with silk-covered carrots and cauliflowers. These are things I can relate to as a designer. It's about being novel, about being whimsical. It's about taking your work seriously, but taking chances and always keeping your sense of humor. I love what I do. I feel great passion for my work, for my art. I have fallen many times, but I always get up. I think I attribute much of my character to being Italian, having a strong, loving family, and a deep faith in God, who carries us when we are at our weakest and most fragile. In closing, I would like to tell you that when I received the award in Italy for my work, I couldn't help but think of my grandmothers and all the Italian women who came before me, those who were artists and housewives, architects, healers, business owners, scholars, and mothers who worked so hard and received no recognition and very little praise. I know that tonight we are celebrating Columbus, but I'd like you all to raise your glasses and drink a toast to all the Italian women whose sacrifices, dedication, and work contributed to the beauty and betterment of society and made many of our accomplishments possible. Thank you.